is that I was trying to use the grid manager and I was trying to call the grid manager on the object as it was being created. And that turns out to be an exceptionally bad idea. I'll kind of show you why. So for example, we were adding entries and labels to a window. So let's go ahead and do that again, just for funsies. We're not going to put a whole lot into this because I want to move on to other topics. We're on X, I believe. That's cool. If we meet on Thursday and next week, we will have been on lecture Z. We will have used up all the letters. Pretty neat. All right. So from tkinter import star. If I think I'm going to use the message box, I may as well bring that in as well. From tkinter import message box. Class mywin colon. It's making a knit method. So def space 2 underscores init 2 underscores parentheses self in parentheses colon. Now we don't have to export absolutely everything. We don't need to do self.this, self.that, self.the other. Only the things that are going to be shared between more than one function or that need to be accessed from the client code need to be done as self variables. On the other hand, there's no risk involved in making them all self variables, but let's be a little bit conservative. Self.win is equal to tk, capital T, lowercase k, parentheses in parentheses. Now let's make a label. L equals capital A, capital L, able. We have to attach it to our window. Oh, I'm sorry. Let's make that. Tell you what, let's do it like I think I did on the example in the back. Let's just create everything as though we weren't inside a class, and then at the very end of the method, go ahead and create some self variables by copying them over. It's a lot less typing this way. So window is equal to tk, label is equal, L is equal to label, parentheses, window, comma, text equals, right, URL, like if we're going to let them type in a URL. And then E equals entry, parentheses, window. And we're going to have to pack that stuff. Or we're going to put it on the grid. And I've really fallen in love with the grid manager, so I'm not going to play with pack. Since I haven't added them to the grid when I run it, this isn't going to do anything. But let's go ahead and do mywin app, parentheses in parentheses, just to create our window, watch it run, and then we can incrementally increase it, incrementally improve it. That's because I called it, I made it look like Java, and this is not how you do it. All right, so app equals mywin, capital M, lowercase, like app equals mywin, like that. All right, so it created the window. The objects are not there. Here's what was going on. If I did this, well, if I called the grid manager, say on label L, but then I print the results of that, tell you what, print L here, or print E here, because it was the entries that was giving us, and then print comma type, parentheses E. See what we did there? We're curious about the type that we're getting back from it. Now when we print E, it's not going to be real informative. We'll probably just say the name of the class, which is entry. But let's take a look at what we see, because then when we call the grid manager, it's going to look very different. Okay, so see, this is what we got. This is the type of it. It's a tkinter.entry object, which is great. But if I had called the grid manager right here, if I added, don't do this because I'm going to have to delete it. If I'd added grid you know, row is equal to 0 here, or row is equal to 1, then when it comes back, its return type is none, and its class is none type. And the reason why is because it's effectively as if we had done this. Don't do this either. E equals E dot grid row equals 1. Right, we're erasing the contents of E and replacing it with whatever gets returned from the grid function, which is none. It doesn't return anything. It's not supposed to. It's just supposed to put something on the map. It doesn't need to return anything. So we were wiping out the contents of the variable and replacing it with none with a capital N. And then in time we tried to do dot set or dot get on it. We couldn't do that. So it's because I was trying to be fancy or succinct or make it look pretty and put the grid calls on the same line as we created it. That's okay if you're going to never use the variable again, right? But yeah, I mean, I could just do that and put .grid there and put a label on there if I'm never going to change that label, but I'm not gonna. Okay, so here's what we really want to do is let's go ahead and put the label on the top row and the entry on the next. So L.grid row equals 0, comma, column equals 0. Maybe we'll put them side by side. And E.grid, the entry, row equals 0, comma, column equals 1. And which of these things would be useful for us to have access to later? The window reference and the E reference. So self.window equals window, and self.capital E equals E. See what we did there? We just used local variables throughout it, and then at the very end we go ahead and export those two as instance variables as part of the class that can be accessed down here if we wanted to. Let's make sure we haven't broken it yet. Syntax errors and not. All right, URL, and we've got something there. Don't have a button. Is anybody getting syntax errors at this part? I don't want to go 30 minutes and then leave y'all behind. We all good? Alrighty. So let's make a button. B equals button, parentheses, window, except put this above those self.window business. Let's leave these selfie exports. This is the very last thing we do. So B equals button. We're going to attach it to that window or that frame if we had created one. Creating a frame would have been a good idea because we could do some padding. We didn't. And then title equals, text equals quote load. It's going to load a URL. If I had done the lecture about how eval is a very risky thing to do, yeah, I think I had. It's such a convenient thing. You want to run something inside the operating system, you just call eval, but we're not going to do that. All right, so we need a command for the button to trigger. The right thing to do would be to make the command part of the class. So we're going to do command equals self.load, since that's what the button is supposed to do. And I don't strictly think we need to export the button. I don't see why we would need to. So I'm not going to, but if we needed to, we'd do self.b equals b. And you know, of course, that these variable names are not magic. You can call them anything you want. You can give them better names. Okay, so let's make a self.load method. def load, parentheses, self, in parentheses, colon. Let's just get the text out and print it. All we need to do at this point. URL equals e.get, parentheses in parentheses, except I forgot the self. URL equals self.get e.get parentheses in parentheses. And then let's print that. Print URL, end quote, comma URL. Or, you know, we could message box it or whatever. It's easier to type print than message box, but if you remember, it's messagebox.showInfo if you'd rather pop it up on the screen. And make sure it works, and then make sure it works for everybody. What do you know? Where'd I get? Okay, what did I do wrong, guys?
Button supposed to be capital.
Capital B, right, because it's a class. And it's almost universal that your class names are capitalized. So right here, that needs to be capital B. See that line? Fix that to a capital B on the button. When I walk around, I'll be deeply disappointed if anybody still has a lowercase. No, I'm kidding. But whenever I make a mistake and then correct it, somebody doesn't get to follow me along because they were typing something else, which I understand. Alrighty. I forgot to add the button to the grid. Where shall we put it? Out to the side? Underneath it? Let's put it out to the side. So I'm going to do row equals 0, column equals 2. But you have to create the button afterwards, right? So underneath B is equal to button, b.grid. And by the way, I think that if you left off the row parameter entirely, it would default to 0. But I think it's much cleaner to provide them both. All right, that should put a login button out to the side of our text. We could have put it underneath it. If you wanted to put it underneath it, you could put row is equal to 1, column is equal to 0, column span equals 2, and it would fill up the entire bottom row, or at least it would center it. All right, load. All righty, now we're cooking. It actually did something. I'm liking it. I want to see it do it for everybody. I'm going to pause the recorder. Not seeing my example? We're going to Google it. Text var, or is it string var? Let's find out. tkinter entry. Text box. Okay, is it string var? Probably so. String var. Okay, so what we are going to do is, just like this, create a string var. And when we create the variable, we're going to bind that variable to the control so that if the control ever changes it, it updates this. So string var is just what's known as a wrapper class for a string. Gives it additional functionality so that, you know, if you ever take Java, then you're going to learn the idea of wrapper classes because you have ints and floats and doubles, but then you have wrapper classes for them that give them more functionality. So let's change it so that our URL gets passed in as a text variable. And if we eyeball this syntax, it's going to be, I don't know, URL is equal to string var, or self.url is equal to string var, capital S, capital V, and then we're going to do text variable equals URL. And then when we want to get the data out, we just do e.get. Nope, that's not right, but we're going to give it a shot. Okay, so right here where we created the grid, comment out those 2 lines entirely. I want to see those lines go away. Just so that we get it exactly right. You can delete them too, but I'm going to leave them commented out, right? We deleted the 2 entry methods. That also breaks this down here, but our method's going to come back. Yeah, let's get rid of that too. Get rid of that one. We're going to remove all references to the entry because we're going to create a different one and we're going to replace it. Okay, so URL equals capital S and capital V, string var, like that. We could even initialize it with something. I believe if we put quote, question mark, quote there, it would initialize it with something. I'm not going to do that though. Don't want to deviate from our examples. And then E equals entry. Attach it to our window. So entry, question mark, window, comma, text variable equals URL. So these are the lines we just added, and we haven't added it to the grid yet, so we got to add one more line. This is new. This is new. One more. E.grid. We could just copy this one. Parentheses, row equals 0, comma, column equals 1. These are our 3 new lines. Oh, by the way, we got stuck back there. We were getting an error on this line, and it said command is not a parameter of the button class. I mean, it said it much more wordily than that. And we stared at it, and we stared at it, and we stared at it. We could not fix it until we just deleted that line and retyped it. And what that means is that an invisible character, and I don't know how they get in there. I see it more often using NetBeans, the Java editor. Some kind of invisible character got typed in there. I should not have tried to demonstrate it. And so it was like, pretend that X is our invisible character. That doesn't work. Okay, so we just had to delete it and retype it. If you ever get totally frustrated and you're 100% convinced that that line is correct, you might just wind up retyping it. Stupid, I know. Maybe it never happens with y'all's editor. That'd be nice.
I've had it happen once even in
Yeah, in Notepad+. Alrighty, so had it happen. Let's run it and see if we get our entry. Let's see if we get, oh, I don't know why my eyes don't automatically go up there. We need to figure out how to center our dialogue. Okay. Well, boom, it blows up because my win object has no attribute E. Why? Because we didn't export it. We decided, or we made an executive decision on the professor's account that we're not going to use the entry to get the data in and out. Instead, we're going to use our variable. So we need to export that variable. So down here, we need to make it an instance member by doing self.url equals URL. Once you get this working, why not delete these 3 lines of comments? They just clutter it up. All right. And then if I type something and click load, it's still going to blow up because I haven't changed the load function yet, the load method. But we're going to do that. Come down here, and instead of self.e.get, we're going to make it self.url.get. Self.url.get, parentheses in parentheses. This is new. We just added that line. And I guess strictly speaking, we also added this line. All right, so that's working. Anytime anybody types in anything, and then the framework updates that string variable to match. And it doesn't even have to be a string variable. I'm going to change it, but don't make this change because I'm going to change it back. Let's stick a number in there. Like I said, don't make these changes. I'm going to change it back. Boom. Forget it. Get an error. Not going to waste time. But you can bind a numeric data type and pass it into the entry so that when they, when we call get, we'll get a floating point number or we'll get an integer back out of it. We really wanted that to work. Not going to spend our time on it. Okay, so it's working. Let's prove that we can interface with the data by its variable name. Like as soon as they click it, I don't know what we're going to do. It'd be stupid to delete it, but just to show that we can. Self.url equals, yay, you clicked it. We're going to delete this, obviously. And it's just demonstrating that we can interact with this variable and it updates the user interface to match. So self.url is effectively just a string. Well, I mean, you have to call .get and set to play with it. And I probably didn't. Yeah, I didn't. It should be .set. Self.url.set parentheses. In some interface frameworks, you can just assign it like that. But tkinter was created after the creation of Python. It doesn't have quite that good of interaction. All right, and you see what it says? Yay, you clicked it. It modified the string variable, which then modified our user interface. That's dumb. We're not going to do that. I'm going to delete that line. Or at least, at the very least, comment it out. All right, the next thing I'm going to do after I make sure that everybody has it running is delete the lines, the red lines. I want them to go away, but let's make sure it's working for everybody. Right. What are we going to make this do? Let's make it so it'll run out to the internet and pull some text in. If you took Donna Wilson's class, you may have done an exercise where you access a web page called Starbuzz and you pull out the price of coffee, something like that. We're not going to use the Starbuzz example, but I do want to load up the HTML of a web page. What is HTML? A lot of y'all know. Some of y'all may not have done this. If you're looking at a web page, you right click and do view page source. Alrighty, there's a whole bunch of stuff. Web pages have gotten a lot more complicated than they were originally. If we Google up like CERN first website, info.cern.ch. Yeah. All right. If I view the URL of this, view the page source of this, it still looks long, but it really is a lot cleaner. It's not using JavaScript. It's not using styles. It's not using CSS. What we're seeing here, you going to zoom in? Okay. I'm going to load up one that I'm absolutely sure is real easy. This thing has been around forever. All right. All it does is print a picture of a anime character who's bonus point for anybody who knows who that is. Yeah, that's Lum. You're right. Okay. So, anyways, well, there's a glitch up here at the top, but let's view the web page. No, I did view background image. Bad. Come back over here. View page source. Alrighty. Image, anything between the angle braces, is known as a tag. We have an HTML tag, which is going to begin all of your web pages unless you're doing some strange variant, XHTML or something like that. I can't change these using the web source, but if I choose inspect, I can go and actually make changes to it, and it'll reflect it, the change automatically. So view page source. This is a tag. This is a tag. This is a tag. I bet we can guess what image does. Image puts an image on the screen. Here's our picture of Lum. There's a path to our character. And so if I did, open link, a new window or whatever, it would, pull up the picture of Lum. So we have tags, and then we have things that modify the tags. Like this, source equals. If you just had image surrounded in braces, and you didn't have any tags, it wouldn't display anything. It wouldn't know what to display. So we put some attributes. This attribute, style, references a CSS syntax. I'm going to leave that off for now, but we can guess what it does, right? I mean, it sets a picture equal to 100% of the screen. I don't remember that being true. Oh, that's because it's stuck inside a table. Anyways, and then we have another attribute. This is the important one with the URL. Almost every tag is going to have a closing tag, or a lot of them will. Image doesn't have one, although you can stick a backslash there to close it. You don't need to. BR, which stands for break, doesn't have a closing tag. It would not break it if you added one. What do I mean by closing tag? HTML and then /HTML, pairs, just like curly braces. right? Body slash body. Div, which just means we're going to divide our web page up, slash div. Table slash table. So we have the opening tag and then we have the closing tag, and usually you have to have them paired. Like I said, the image tag doesn't have a close tag. Why? Because its attribute is embedded as the tag itself. Unlike, we'll get back there. Okay, so now we've seen what HTML looks like. Very, very brief 2-second introduction to it. We want to modify our code so that we load up and print the HTML. And we're going to do it in several steps. I'm kind of thinking about not making it part of the class. Just because then we don't have to tab everything over. And then we're going to call this method from this class. That's sounding complicated. I think I'm going to leave it as part of the class. So def load underscore URL, parentheses, self, in parentheses, colon. We're going to have to import another library up at the top. Import URL, from URL live import request is what it's going to say, I believe, but I'm going to make sure that's absolutely correct. All right. URL live, this has got 2 lowercase l's in the middle of it. Scroll all the way up here, we're going to add another import. From URL live import request. Why request? Because we're going to be requesting a web page. Then we're going to go back down and we're going to make our load function call load URL. You could even pass a URL if we tacked on a second parameter, but since we have a self.url here, well, no, we don't. I guess we can get the text out that way. Let's do it. Let's be all fancy type. Nah, we don't want to be fancy. So, where it says URL is equal to self.url.get, no, I'm not going to do that. We're just going to pull it back out from here. So URL equals self.url.get, parentheses in parentheses, just like we did up here. If I'd done self URL equals self.url.get, I would have been making the same mistake that we did with the, I like saying we, like it's your fault, that I did with the entries on Thursday, where we're rewriting that method. Excuse me, we're rewriting that variable. We don't want to do that. Okay, so URL is equal to self.url.get. Now we're going to create our request, which is going to create, we're going to just call it page. Page equals request.url open parentheses URL in parentheses. And let's just stop here and put a print message. And it's to eliminate syntax errors as soon as possible. Print parentheses quote load underscore URL, because that's the name of our method, end quote comma URL. We want to make sure that works. If it doesn't work now, it's not going to work later. What happens if we click load with nothing? Okay, it's nice for it. We probably ought to make the load URL give them a warning message or an error message if they don't type in anything. http:// lum, LUM, LAND.com And I strongly recommend that if this works, we just copy and paste it, except it's not letting me right click and copy it. Can I do Control C? Yeah. Alright, so just double click on that and do Control C or Command C. That way we don't have to type it over. Well, you know, we could do call.insert on it. If this works. Alright, so it loaded up the URL. Didn't really do anything right, but it created the page. Let's fill in the URL as the last line of our init method. Right, we have a variable called URL, or self.url. Let's set it. So way down here, last line of the init method, self.url.set, parentheses, quote. And we can play with putting other URLs once we're done. HTTP : / I think I said backslash when I was typing it. lumland.com, end quote, in parentheses. Now when we run it, that'll already be filled in, but we can change it. All right. It might be nifty if we just assume the HTTP, but that wouldn't be a great thing because a lot of websites are now using HTTPS. All right. Wave your hand if you got red text. All right. So this is the line we just added. I'm going to delete these other little news here. Spurious. We have fixed those, although I guess they serve as landmarks. All right. As a reminder, if I went past this too quickly, we added from URL lib import request. Now, if there are other things in the URL library, we might just want to import star. I don't expect us to do that, but why not? I changed URL lib import request to import star. I did it as request first, just so you would know exactly which method we were going to be using. Alrighty, we got a return from this. We got a page. Why don't we print our page? It's not going to look real good. And we're never going to see anything that looks like the web page. Why? We're bringing in the HTML, which comes in as pure text. So print page. That's enough just to see what kind of gobbledygook we're going to be getting. None. Is it calling my method at all?
Nope.
Yeah, that was dumb. We're going to have to add a line to the load method. Yeah, I tell you what, just delete the DEF. Take that DEF out. We're just going to chain it all together. Good enough. There's a little bit of cleanup we can do that I'm sure that you can notice. Alrighty, request is not defined. Said who? Okay then. Alright, that one's like message box. When you do import star, it doesn't bring it in. I really need to figure out why. Not going to mess with that now. If you change this to import star, change it back to import request. Go down here, take out the DEF that we had between the two methods. Why don't we do a little bit of cleanup? I'm going to delete that comment, and I'm going to, these are duplicate lines, right? We don't need to do both of those, so let's delete the second one. You see where it says URL equals, you don't have to. Don't delete the wrong line though. Delete URL is equal to self.url.get. Alright. When we printed the page, we didn't get much useful out of it. All we got is the name of the object. That means that they did not add an __str__ method to their object. to their class. However, I got a sneaky feeling that if we call .get something equivalent to that, then we'll actually get some good stuff. Excuse me, not .get, .read. .read, parentheses, in parentheses. We should store that in a result rather than just printing it out. So I'm going to probably wind up deleting that line and retyping it just a little bit. I don't want to see this work. All right. There it is, the little bit gobbledygooky. It's got this B single quote here, and it's got another quote there. Well, that's not really too bad, but we want to turn that into pure ASCII text, or what's known as UTF-8, meaning 8-bit text. UTF-8. A variable width character capable of encoding all valid code points in Unicode. Okay, when I said it was ASCII, it's not ASCII, it's Unicode. Same thing though. No, not the same thing at all. But ASCII is a subset of Unicode. So we're going to have to decode this into UTF-8 so that we can manipulate it. Sounds complicated. Nah, it's not complicated. It's just another function call. What I'd like for you to do, though, is instead of print page.read, I don't care if you delete that line or not. I'm going to delete page.read, and then I'm going to say text, or I could do body. The text is good enough. How about HTML? The HTML is equal to page.read, parentheses, in parentheses. And let's, on the next line, print the HTML. Print parentheses, quote, HTML, end quote, comma, HTML. So those are our two new lines. All right. If we look here, we should find a line that says HTML. Oh, we haven't decoded it yet. Sorry. So that's not really the decoding version of it. So we're going to add one more line here, and we're probably going to delete that print after it. HTML equals HTML.decode, and we have to turn it from that native encoding to UTF-8, which is going to be in all lowercase inside quotes. Quote, UTF-8, end quote, in parentheses. Why don't we move that print statement underneath it, or vice versa? So just get that print statement underneath it. Alrighty. That's looking clean. This is the HTML. Our next task could be to split this up so that we see all the tags. Now, there's something known as regular expressions, which somebody's using in their project, and I'm incredibly proud of you for doing so, which is an incredibly powerful way of manipulating text to pull items of data out. And I have to relearn it every single time I use it. And so I'm not going to use regular expressions. For one thing, I want to give an example of pulling something out of text by doing deliberate string manipulation, direct string manipulation, rather than setting up a regular expression and then parsing it up like that. So my end goal is a list where every item is a tag. So we could write a function, and when I say could, we're going to, that takes this string and starts chopping it up. What do I mean by that? It's going to look for an open angle, it's going to look for a close angle, and it's going to use those as a slice to pull that stuff out. And then we're going to keep going find that angle, pull that out as a slice, and so on. So let's write ourselves a function that'll do that. Split won't do it, by the way. Or if it does know how to do it, I don't know how to configure it to do that. So I'm going to write a function called HTML underscore split, parentheses, it's going to take a string. For ease of use, I could use the word text, but I'm going to be totally sloppy and just call it single letter S. Okay, just for testing purposes, we're going to call HTML split on something with angle braces.
What HTML split on in the class or?
We could put it there, but I don't feel like typing self dot here and there, so I'm just making it a function. Would not be a bad idea to make it part of the class. We're going to have to invoke it anyways. Let's make it part of the class. You convince me. DEF HTML underscore split self comma S. Just to prove that we were run, print quote HTML underscore split end quote comma S. We're going to wind up taking a lot of print statements out. And here, we need to invoke HTML split after we're done loading it. So, on the line above it, I'm really kind of wishing that I'd left this its own function. This load method's going to get huge, but we'll run with it. Capital L for our list is equal to self.html end parentheses self.html split parentheses, and we're going to pass in our HTML. If we just made it a self variable, we would not have to pass it in like this. And we don't need to be sticking data around, passing data around inside the class like that all the time. We might want to be able to call this function from outside. Okay, let's make sure it works. When the button gets called, we get this print message. Just want to see it. Make sure it works. All right, I didn't get a syntax error. I lucked out. So we're going to need, just as a first brush at it, let's do this. L is equal to split parentheses S, print parentheses L. Thought of it different, not S. L is equal to split S comma quote open brace end quote. It occurs to me, what I'm thinking is that this will break up the HTML into its chunks, and we're not going to be searching the string the way I was planning on it, but I think it's actually going to be easier. Love flying by the seat of my pants and messing y'all up. Let's see if it works. Alrighty, split is not defined. What did I do wrong there? I bet somebody recognizes it. You don't pass in the S variable as a parameter, as an argument. Instead, it is a method of the string class. So, capital L equals S dot split, parentheses quote, less than, end quote, end parentheses. And on the next line, print parentheses L. I just changed that line fairly significantly, so make sure you get that. All right, what we should see is a list where everything is broken up by the opening braces. And then to get the tag, all we have to do is to remove these. There's something slightly wrong with that method, but I think that my other method of doing this was probably going to give us the same problem. Maybe so. What I'm thinking about is don't type this, there's something called a pre-tag where you can put free-form text. Hello, this is text /pre. If you do that, then hello is going to be on one line on your page. This is text going to be on the next line of the page, the web page you're looking at. And if you left that out, then what HTML does is it never adds a space to your text. Excuse me, it never adds a carriage return to your space. It just separates things by spaces. The only way you get it to go to the next line usually is to add a break. That's just like hitting the enter key. Enough of that. I'm just not quite sure how the pre-tag would be handled. Don't need to worry about that. This doesn't need to be perfect. Why don't we do something a little bit more sophisticated than print L? Let's print it out with a for loop, with a value-based for loop. I'm going to remove that print statement, and for v in L colon, hit enter, print v. All right. Here's what we're seeing. This is every list entry. Kind of wishing that we could see which one was which. What I'm going to do is I'm going to modify my print statement to say tag equals, end quote, comma. All right. I see something I would like to do. I don't like these blank lines there. Who remembers how to remove blank lines from the end of a string? There's a method of the string class which just chops off all the blank space and character returns at the end of a line.
N equals quotation mark.
Trim. We're going to use the trim function to strip off all the white space. So, v equals v dot trim, parentheses in parentheses. That takes off all the white space at the beginning and the end. And white space includes tabs, the space bar, and the character return. That should remove all the blank lines. Should get real close to it. Or just not. Anybody remember the real name of the function? We used this when we were reading from a file, but we didn't use enough for reading from a file. That's a non-Python word. It's a different language. It's strip. And you can use L strip or R strip if you only want to strip stuff from one side or the other. All right, our tags are looking real good in my opinion, except they got these things. Well, we can replace them. There's a string method called replace, which makes it trivial to replace anything or to delete anything. What we're going to do is we're going to call .replace, say, I want you to replace all angle braces with an empty character, and it's just going to delete them. First, we might replace it with something else just to demonstrate exactly what it's doing. So after we strip it, we're going to call v equals v dot replace, parentheses, quote, probably about time to do walkabout, and I also don't want to run like an hour and 45 minutes like I did last time. Parentheses, quote, less than, end quote, comma. Replace it with just a couple of exclamation marks.
The other direction. That's what you're using.
You're correct. You're correct, because I want to nuke the closing tags, not the... Well, that would be harmless, but it wouldn't do what I wanted to do. All right. We see what it did. It replaced all the closing braces with the exclamation marks. Yeah, it works just as well if we don't put any exclamation marks in there at all. Using regular expressions, that could probably be done in 1 or 2 lines of code. Alrighty. We got it. We got our tag, each tag. We have BR tags, we have a center tag. Way up at the top, there should be a body tag and an HTML tag. We got it working. We're going to stop here, but what we could do then is we could be looking for pieces of text out of it. We could parse each line. In that Starbuzz example when I told you about the coffee page, you would pull out each line, you would be looking for text that like began with a $sign, and then you could do something with that. All right, I'm going to stop, make the Dropbox, and then do another walkabout because I'm sure that a couple of people got broken text now. I had one more comment to make, and I have forgotten what it was. It would be neat, kind of, if I could do that, v.strip, v.replace. But the reason why you can't do that, and I kind of like for you to tuck this away into your brain because it's true in other languages like Java as well, is that strings are immutable, meaning they can't be changed. All you can do is create a new string. So when we call v.replace, what it does is it's a function that goes and creates a brand new string with all the letters, with all these removed, and then returns it. And if we didn't have v is equal to, it did not touch the original contents, and so we wouldn't have done any good. So this is a very common syntax. All right. Let's stop this.